Well, I think at the core, when we think of Islamophobia in the Western context, meaning Muslims who are living in the Western world, but also in terms of the West looking at the Muslim world, the Islamophobia is a type of racism. It is also a structural project that is built on a long history, originating, I would say, from even some of the materials that are redeployed or historical periods that are navigated, the Crusades period, the Inquisition period, but more importantly, it emerges out of the colonial period, where domination and colonizing the global South required or had a structure to it based on dehumanizing the subject that you are going to colonize. So in this sense becomes that the reason we're colonizing you is because you are a subhuman, and your subhumanness in essence is located in your natural state or your state of inferiority, and the colonization project is to bring you forth into civilization. So this would be understood as the white man burden, civilizing the barbarians. Manifest destiny is in relations to also bringing around a particular colonial conceptualization of Christianity. So in this sense, the structure of Islamophobia that emerges, it is directly connected to the colonial project. And therefore, if we think about the various Muslim societies that have experienced colonization from the British, first and foremost, the French, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the Spanish, all operated with placing the indigenous populations, the global South population, in a subhumanness categorization, and a series of negations were constructed. I think the work of Albert Memmi, The Colonizer and the Colonizer, is in essence really a very important work, or Frantz Fanon's work as well in relations to the colonial legacy and the colonial epistemological structure. So it was a whole series of negations of the colonized subject that begins to really formulate the structure of Islamophobia. Moving to the present, the fact that you have the emergence of visible Muslim communities in the Western world, whether it's in Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there is a sense of using the Muslim subject as a way to re-energize what is thought to be a lax or a setting of a slow stage of decline or lack of vigor in the Western world. So in here, the Muslim subject becomes as a tool to try to re-energize a historical past that was crafted around whiteness and white supremacy. As the Cold War came to an end in the Cold War between the United States and the Western world, and the alliance of NATO and Warsaw, and its reflection in the global South, a new enemy was actually contemplated. And this new enemy becomes Islam and Muslims. And the work or the writing on the clash of civilization is very, very important. It's a wrong thesis, but doesn't mean that many people don't actually believe and have actually internalized it. So the clash of civilization thesis of Samuel Huntington have become almost the new religious text that is used by many of many in the Western world, those who are pushing on nationalism, right-wing politics, neoconservatism, also pro-Israel, pro-Zionist. So the clash of civilization essentially, on page 20 of Huntington's book, says that in order for us to love ourselves, we need to actually find or locate the object of our hate. If we don't hate someone, it'll be very difficult in terms of what we to explain it. It'll be very difficult for us to develop and have self-love. So in this sense, Islamophobia becomes the rallying point in order to actually bring back self-confidence, patriotic unity and solidarity, and energize a conceptualization of the West that was seen to be lacking in the post-Cold War era. And it has certain aspects to it. Part of the aspect would be focusing on the demography, which is always is a racist project, unease about the increasing numbers of Muslims, pulling up red herring in relations to creeping Sharia and anti-Sharia legislation, beginning to try to limit immigration and problematize the whole immigration, especially as immigration from number of Muslim countries increases due to Western intervention. Again, intervention in Iraq, the intervention in Afghanistan, the intervention in Syria, the constant, again, aid and support to Israel that leads to Palestinians leaving as immigrant and refugees, Somalia, Libya, and so on. But it actually, immigration and refugees are shaped around Islamophobic discourse because it's projected as undermining Western civilization and the cohesion of Western society. But in essence, Huntington and all of his clash of civilization warriors are attempting to reconstruct the historical Western past where white supremacy and whiteness were seen to be triumphant and asserted as the norm for moving forward. So it has a very distinctive aspect to how Islamophobia functions and what elements of it. So you'll see some aspect of contesting building of mosques, the restrictions on women's wearing hijab, again, governing the body and space of the targeted subject. So the hijab, niqab ban that we constantly see in France or in Quebec, restrictions on Muslim civic and political participation. So that's the feature that we see in Islamophobia in the Western world. Now, coming to Muslim majority states, one has to actually define Islamophobia differently, and this is where some of my work on trying to arrive at the definition of what do we mean, because these are Muslim majority states. Some states are 97, 98% Muslims, some 85 or so Muslim population, yet we see the problematization. We see a Islamophobic structure that is operable, but it has different notions and different nods to focus on. So Islamophobia in Muslim majority states, it's a political, social, economic, military, cultural, and religious process that emerge out and shaped by the colonial Eurocentric hegemonic discourses that are there, that we could date it to the late 18th century. So again, Islamophobia in Muslim majority countries, we actually can pinpoint it to the late 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And I think how the Muslim societies begin to see their relationship to the Western world, and this will be the onset of the modern colonial project. Islamophobia is constituted and internalized by the Muslim elites by adopting an imitative project in the post-colonial state. So the post-colonial state is structured around an imitative project. The imitative project is try to imitate and replicate the particularities of the Western world trajectory of development, and in particular the relationship of the political to the religious, or the political to the institution, to the religious institutions. That history is a particular history in terms of the relationship of church and state. That history is not universal. So again, the particularity of European experience begin to be internalized and made by the post-colonial elites that have been trained by the Eurocentric colonial powers to become, in essence, the custodians in the Muslim majority state, the custodians for the, quote, modern, the secular, the nationalist, and also the notions of the progressive Muslim nation state project. All these projects are born out of the colonial enterprise, and they're rooted into an imitative project. So to be modern, to be nationalist, to be progressive, you have to take an antagonistic attitude, both in terms of your mannerism, in terms of your conduct, as well as relate to aspects in the society with the negative relationship to Islam and Muslimness in such a way in order for you to be admitted into the modern secular, nationalist, progressive Muslim state project. If you don't, then you have to bring all the structural hegemonic powers of discipline in order to actually extract Muslimness out of you. So in essence, they're searching for a Muslim DNA in the Muslim subject to be extracted out. So these are ways to think of both Islamophobia in the Western context versus Islamophobia in Muslim majority state.